Hi there, my name is Luke Challenor and I'm about to present to you on measuring and evaluating your training. Please stick around afterwards and I look forward to meeting you and chatting through any questions or comments you might have at the end of the presentation. Here's the agenda for today's session. We'll start with an introduction to measuring and evaluating your training. Then we'll have a look at ROI and what that means from a training perspective. We'll look at how to quantify your training needs and then how to turn those training needs into your training outcomes. I'll give you some tips on how to ask the right questions to gather good information. And then we'll look at how to analyze your results to measure your training. And then we'll finish with using data to make your training better. First of all, measuring and evaluating your training. Should you do it? Dot point there says it all. Yes, you should. Often you get to the end of a training program and you think, wow, that was a really good session. Do I really need to go and measure it? Yes, absolutely. Two big reasons. One is because you've been asked to do that training session for a client or an organization who wants to make a difference. You want to know, did you make a difference? And two, as a trainer or a facilitator yourself, you want to know, did I do a good job? Did I help people learn something? Did I move them? Did I give them more than what they had when they started the day? Just taking you back to some measuring and evaluating training 101, remind you about three models that are pretty popular in L&D circles. The first is the Kirkpatrick model, which is probably the most famous training and evaluating model of them all. Kirkpatrick had 4 levels of training and evaluation. He had first level was reaction, so how did participants react to the actual training session itself? The second level is learning. Did they learn anything during the training? The third level is, did they have any behavioral change? And the fourth level is, do we see any business results, any improvement to business results as a result of your training? The second model is the Brinkerhoff model, and this is based around successful case studies. So what Brinkerhoff did was look at different learners as part of training programs and look at what they actually did back in the workplace. So did they implement any new initiatives or new procedures, and did they have any benefits to the business? And the third model is the Jack Phillips ROI model, and this is basically cost versus benefit. So did we get more benefit from training than the cost of putting the training together? Okay, let's have a look at ROI first of all. You might have heard of ROI or return on investment. It's pretty common in training circles. Again, people are always seeking to try and measure the return on investment for their training. I'll explain it to you first, and then we'll have a look at an example. So ROI stands for return on investment. And basically, it's the benefit of the training minus the cost of the training divided by the cost of the training times 100. And that will give you a percentage. So what is the return on the investment? So what money did we make based on the investment that we put into training? So we'll do a practical example for you. And the first question down the bottom of that slide there is 200% a good ROI? So while you're sitting there watching this program thinking, is this a good ROI? Most of you are probably nodding, saying, yeah, 200% is pretty good in anyone's books. I'll give you the example from the actual training program. So this is an example where 10 account managers attended a sales training program. The total cost of the program was $10,000. And when we reviewed the results of the training program, one participant increased their sales by $30,000 following the program. Seems like a pretty good result. So in this situation, the ROI calculation is 30,000 minus 10,000 divided by 10,000, which is 20,000 divided by 10,000, which is 200% ROI. So again, the question for you is, does an ROI of 200% indicate that it was an effective and successful program? Yep, you're probably sitting there nodding. Okay, let's see. It seems like a good number, but there's a lot of missing data. What we could also have told you is this. As a result of the program, when we reviewed it and measured it, 9 participants scored the program 1 out of 10. That doesn't sound good. 3 participants have left the company. That's not good. Engagement levels have dropped by 50% across the sales team. That's not very good either. And 7 of the 10 participants are refusing to use the new sales system. So clearly, in this case, ROI doesn't tell the whole story. So remember, we started off with a 200% ROI, seemed really good, but when you look at the rest of the data around the program, there's actually a lot of holes in the program, or a lot of holes in the company's ability to use the program. So what we need to do is not rely on ROI by itself, but rather let's look at other sorts of metrics that we can use to help tell the whole story. Okay, this slide is about quantifying learning needs. And I think out of all your evaluating and measuring training, this is probably the most important. As a facilitator or a learning consultant, we should always be trying to define what is the actual problem that we are trying to solve. We need to ask really good questions to our clients or the organizations that we're providing training for. These questions are like, why are we doing this training? What results have you seen and what should they be? What behaviors have you seen and what should they be? Do you have any examples, particularly for things like poor performance or poor behaviors? We need to really understand the problem that we're trying to solve. And the last dot point there is, how is this impacting your organization? The better you can define the problem, the easier it will be to measure the solution. Now that we know the business needs, we need to turn those needs into learning outcomes. On this slide, we've got 3 rules to help you do this. The first rule is to remember that your learning program must specifically state what the participants are expected to do. Rule number 2, every piece of content must relate to helping the participants implement the required skills. And rule number 3 is you need to be able to measure if participants are implementing the skills. Let's have a look. In this example, we've identified the business needs as frontline managers not providing performance feedback to their teams. This is quite common for many frontline leadership development programs. So given this business need, we can define the learning outcome as this program will give you the skills to deliver performance feedback in a face-to-face environment. From there, we can create the relevant content. And in this example, it would be topic 1, assessing performance, topic 2, planning for a feedback meeting, topic 3, delivering feedback, topic 4, reviewing results. Now, given the business needs, we can also implement that across our measurement process as well. And in this example, I'd be recommending either a survey or a one-to-one interview. And the types of questions I'd be asking are, have you delivered a feedback session since attending this training? How effective was your feedback session? And what further support do you need to help you develop this skill? Asking the right questions. This is probably one of the most challenging parts of evaluating your training program. Participants generally only have a limited amount of headspace at the end of the day, and also in terms of being able to provide you feedback. The less questions you ask, the better, and you'll get better quality information. In this example here, we've got 2 types of measures we're looking to work with. We've got behavioral change and learning transfer. So for behavioral change, the types of questions you need to ask are, is the behavior different following the program? Which behaviors have changed or not changed? Are participants being supported to change their behavior? And which participants have changed or not changed? In this scenario, I'd like to do a pre and post type of survey or interview. So that way there you get a benchmark of what the behaviors were before the program, and you can compare those to what the behaviors are after the program. The second measure there is learning transfer. And here what we're looking to try and determine is, are participants using their new skills in the workplace? I'd be asking questions like, which skills are they using? And obviously, which skills are they not using? How well are they using them? Are participants being supported or encouraged to use their new skills? And are there any barriers to using these skills? By asking these questions, you'll get data which you can then use to try and understand what's working, what's not working, how many people are using these skills, and are there any types of problems or issues with implementing the skills from your training program. In the next few slides, we've got a few different metrics and I've got some examples for ways you might go about measuring them. The first is engagement. Engagement is all about the individual's commitment to helping their organization achieve its purpose. I think engagement is a very useful metric for training and development. I think one of the really almost unrealized benefits of a training program is the relationships and the engagement that happen with participants throughout the program. You often hear feedback such as, during lunch was one of the best parts of the course. I got to talk to people I wouldn't normally talk to. I made some new relationships. I've done some networking. And I think as a facilitator or a learning designer, you should really work out how to capture those engagement metrics. I've got two different examples for you, ways to collect that information. The first is a pre and post survey, where you can find out how engaged participants are before the program, and then also compare after the program to see how engaged they are as a result of the program or after the program. Another approach you can use is if your company already does some type of staff engagement or benchmarking surveys, is to get a cross section, find out what the average engagement scores are with the rest of the organization, and then compare that to your participants after their training and see if there's any variation in your participants compared to the rest of the business. And just on this slide, there are some sample questions you can use. I think maybe sticking to 4 to 5 questions is enough, but you'd need to find the questions that you feel are relevant in your workplace. Some of the questions we've got here for you are: I feel valued in my role. I feel like I'm using my skills. I understand how my role contributes to my company's success. My company supports my professional development. I'm committed to helping our company achieve its purpose. I'm developing in my role. My manager cares about my career progression. I'm empowered to use my new skills, and my manager supports me to use my skills. And the way I've done this in the past is simply graph the results. As you can see there, I like doing it before and after. Pick out the key metrics that you're wanting to measure, and then populate a simple bar graph with the before and after. And hopefully that you'll see that there's an increase in engagement following your program. The next metric we'll have a look at is learning transfer. Again, this is pretty common in L&D circles. People talk about measuring learning transfer. What is it? Learning transfer is really a measure of how much of your training is actually being applied in the workplace. To get this information, again, I'd recommend either a one-on-one interview or a post-program survey. I'd look at about 3 to 4 weeks after the training to give the participants enough time to actually have a go at implementing some of those skills from your program workshop. Another tip I would give you is break your transfer down into each of the key learning outcomes or the key skills, and that makes it quite easy to measure, and I'll give you an example of that shortly. The final point there is to, I guess, give your learning transfer score a bit of validity. Maybe think about getting the line managers to do a survey as well, and then you compare the participants to their line managers, and that will help validate the results that come through for you. Here's an example of doing a learning transfer questionnaire. You ask the question: rate yourself on your ability to implement each of the key topics from your workshop. Something as simple as that. And is this example I've provided here? Topic 1, provide performance feedback. I've done a scale of 1 to 5, and that scale could be 1, haven't yet had an opportunity to attempt this skill, all the way through to number 5, which is I've attempted it and I've achieved good results. Why I like doing a scale like this is because if you have a lot of people finding their results are sitting around number 3 or number 4, we'd say, okay, this is quite positive because they're at least attempting the skill. They just haven't quite got it right yet, which might mean there's some opportunities for you for further coaching or support. Another metric we'll have a look at today is business improvement. Now, I define business improvement as a change of process or new initiative that has a measurable impact to the business. And obviously what we're looking for here is any continuous improvement or any new ideas that have come up as part of your training program that have actually made their way back into the workplace. My data collection process for this is the same as before. I like doing either a personal interview or a post-program survey with your different participants. Again, you want to wait at least 3 to 4 weeks after training to give people enough time to try and implement some of these initiatives, and also give them some time to see if the initiatives have worked or not. I like using both a qualitative and quantitative. So that means I like knowing both how many new initiatives have come about, plus also how well were they done? What were the results like? Tell us a bit about it. And that's similar to using a case study method. One final tip there for you is that I would often recommend annualizing the results. So in your reports, I would say these are the results over or predicted over a 12-month period. And in the diagram on the right there, I've got a very simple way of representing this information. You've got productivity initiatives, which are often measured in hours saved for the organization. Profit initiatives, which can either be a reduction in expenses or an increase in revenue, and these are measured in dollars. And then you've also got quality as an initiative, and this can be measured via reduction in errors or double handling or mistakes or rework. So each of these types of initiatives do have some kind of tangible measure associated with them. Okay, the next topic for you then is analysing your results. So I've got 3 checks here for you. So if you haven't never done this before, they're pretty basic, but it'll give you a pretty good start to building your reporting. Check number 1, compare the overall results to the learning objectives. So go all the way back to whatever the learning objectives were, and then you've got one of 3 different scores here. You can exceed your results, you can meet the expectations, or you can not meet expectations. Following that, check number 2 is have a look at the different topics and see, do any specific topics stand out as being better or worse than expected? So if you're using graphs, look for anything that's higher or lower than the other topics. And then what's really important is to ask the question, why? What would be causing that? Why would one topic stand out better or worse than others? And check number 3 is, do any individuals in the workplace or from your work group rather have significantly lower results than anyone else? This is important to do as well for that same reason of, let's ask the question why. What would be causing that? You might find that 1 or 2 people have had real issues in bringing their learnings back into the workplace, and this is a good opportunity for you to find out why. Particularly if other people have done quite well with their results, then let's look at what's happened to those individuals and see what further support they might need. All right, I've got 2 different examples here for you and a couple of things that I'd be looking at if I was analysing these results. So on the left, we've got graphs which are comparing the topics, and on the right, we have graphs which are comparing participants. Now, interesting, on the left, we have, when we're comparing topics there, we have the participants score themselves higher than what their manager did for delegating tasks. So this is interesting because it shows that there's a disjoint somewhere in the system. People think they're better than what their manager thinks. So either the manager doesn't know what they're doing, or the participants aren't communicating to the manager what they're doing, or the manager might have higher expectations. And again, that comes down to communication. They need to communicate with their team members about what the expected level for delegating is. Now, if you look to the right of that, in coaching, this is interesting. This goes the other way. In this example, the manager thinks the participants are better than the participants think about themselves. So this could be because the participants aren't very confident in the particular skill, and the manager thinks, no, actually, you're right, you're fine, but the participant still doesn't feel confident. So in this instance, I think the manager needs to give the participants some feedback to say, you're doing well, keep it up. You're actually doing quite a good job here. Then over in the graph on the right, this is interesting as well. When we're looking at our participants, we want to have a look at, well, what do the participants, how are they rating themselves, and how is the manager rating them? One of the big gaps here is this first one for poor old John. John thinks he's doing quite well, and yet his manager doesn't think he's doing quite well. Okay, so again, this shows probably a lack of line of sight or a lack of communication between the two. I feel that if John thinks he's quite good and the manager doesn't, then the manager needs to provide that feedback to John to let him know what he needs to do to improve. So when pulling your results together, it's really interesting to compare both the topics and the people or the participants as individuals. As you can see from what's in front of you there, this provides a really interesting report to look for further areas of support or coaching, or maybe even the managers of the participants need some skills or development themselves. In this section, I'd like to share with you some ideas about using data to improve your training. First of all, as a facilitator, we should always be learning. We need to be open to finding out what worked and what didn't. We need to keep the elements that worked, and we need to change the parts that didn't work. It's as simple as that. At a very basic level, you would want to look at the following 3 questions. What did participants like or dislike about your training? Is there anything you can learn from that? Which skills were implemented or not implemented as a result of your training? Is there something you can learn from that? And this last dot point is a really interesting question. Would they recommend your program to a friend? If you're brave enough to ask that question, I would also leave a space beside it to say why or why not. And that will give you some really good insights as into what they liked about your program, what they thought of the relevance, and whether they feel that other people would benefit from it. So as a facilitator, you want to try and identify the bits that worked and the bits that didn't work. So that way you keep the bits that worked and you change and adapt and improve the bits that didn't work. In this slide, we've got a few more examples for you about areas that you can measure, and therefore if you can measure them, you can help try to manage or support them. So we've got 3 different areas to consider measuring: the learning program itself, the workplace implementation, and the benefits to the business overall. So the learning program itself, a lot of you would be familiar with the post-program evaluation sheets, or the happy sheets we sometimes call them. And this takes you through things like asking the participants questions about the facilitator, the content, the training environment, the catering. Was it pitched at the right level? Was it engaging? Did they feel comfortable making a contribution? And were you supportive as a facilitator? These questions are all really useful because they help you adapt and adjust your style for future programs. The next area to look at is workplace implementation. We want to have a look at what skills were implemented and what wasn't. We probably want to push down a bit deeper then to find out why, what happened, and what further support could you do or could you offer as a facilitator to help that learning transfer occur. Well, let's look at things like, did they have an opportunity to implement their skills? The line managers, are they supporting them? Are there any barriers? Are the participants able to review themselves? Is there any coaching available for them? And is there a post-program learning cohort that are willing to share with each other and share ideas? And also, if you can get people together after the program, they can share what they've tried, what's worked, and what hasn't worked. So as a facilitator, your job hasn't finished when the program in the classroom is over, but let's also look into the implementation, and whatever we can measure there, then we can see, well, what can we use to add value for next time? And finally, the last element of measuring and looking for opportunities to improve is in the business benefits. Did we solve the business problem? Did we show some level of improvement in productivity or quality or cost control? Did we increase engagement? Have we improved retention? Have we improved customer service? Have we implemented any continuous improvements? Have we reduced complaints? What have we done to move the dial on the business metrics? And again, as a facilitator, you were originally employed to be able to solve a problem or to make something happen in the business. Did you do that? Did you achieve that? If you did, what did you do that was successful that contributed to that? If not, if you didn't have any business benefits, why not? What went wrong? What were the barriers? Or more importantly, what more could you do to improve your training for next time? That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for being a part of it. I look forward to connecting in the future, but I'm also going to be hanging around for the next half an hour or so after this program to answer any questions. I look forward to seeing you then.